Welcome to UNCAGED, the show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we are speaking with Dee Robinson. Hey, Dee, how are you?
Hey there, Ben. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Dee, I'm really excited to talk with you, not because we're just both former Leo Burnetters, but obviously really interested to learn more about Robinson Hill and your career. Dee is the CEO of Robinson Hill. The company was founded and scaled. It's a successful concessions management company. It has expanded operations in the airport and tourist locations around the world. They work with everybody. All the big strategic partners use and work with Robinson Hill, like Hudson Group, Areas USA, and OTG. And some of the brands that you might see when you're in O'Hare or any of the other big airports that they represent are brands like Ben & Jerry's, Lebanese Taverna, Hub 51, the delicious Frontera Grill, and Wow Boa. So we're excited to learn more about Robinson Hill. But before we get there, Dee, tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Well, my career has been one that has just been a joy. And I'll tell you why I call it a joy, because it's been challenging. It's been everything. But I finally realized that all of the challenges I had, hardships, obstacles, are all brought me to where I do what I do today. And I'll start with this. I was someone who wanted to be a CEO very early on, went to Penn, Kellogg, and took corporate jobs and thought this is where I was going to land. And frankly, once I got to the corporate world, I recognized that maybe it wasn't quite for me. And part of that, frankly, meant was that I didn't necessarily see people at the top that looked more like me.
Right.
But the joy is that I also, particularly when I was in banking, but the joy was this, is that I was able to have the courage to say this wasn't for me. And then also try to tap into my own strengths and needs and just take some risk early on in my career. And who knows, most people thought I was crazy, including my mother. But the joy is that because of the example she set, the ability to go out there and do the things that I do and take some chances, I was able to continue on that trajectory.
Certainly it's worked out and you've had a fabulous career, most notably building Robinson Hill to what it is today. Tell me more about that experience and what you're working on now.
Yes, so Robinson Hill, we just celebrated over 26 years in business.
Congratulations.
And, thank you so very much. And when you think about starting with maybe, well, one employee, me, and then scaling up to having thousands, the joy is that over the course of time, we just started to think about how to build a business. I'm a restaurateur, love food. The interesting thing is I actually thought I wanted to be a chef. And so
Wow.
that's absolutely true. So when I left my job at Burnett, and I'll tell you an interesting story about even there, I used to go and work with chefs in the kitchen. And there was one night with Charlie Charter, and I was able to work in his kitchen. And I remember leaving there and saying, there's no way I want to do this. There were people much more passionate about the work.
Yeah.
I knew then, but I remember this one thing. When I left there, I said, I think I want to own restaurants.
Wow.
It was
That's
in
really
that
cool.
moment. So the things, and this is why I encourage people to go try things out before they leap. And I also say, don't do it how I did it, because I did leap. I left Burnett. I'm going to tell a quick story about Burnett, though. You and I know the work environment there.
Yeah.
And I have to also thank Leo Burnett for what I do today. I remember working 30 days straight. I was in at my desk one night, and I decided to calculate my hourly rate based on the hours I was keeping. Right? So you know.
We worked long hours, that's for sure.
So
Burnett was a lifestyle.
and see, you understand that, but others are working similar hours,
Yeah.
long hours. But my point is, if you're not happy doing it, and then think that there's a risk, oh, I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to, if I don't do all this, but the risk is really very little when you think
Yeah.
about the hourly rate. I'm like, well, I could go work for McDonald's, or I could go work for someone else, not have the stress, the strain, and all. But the moment, though, does help you manage the risk, your thoughts about, am I taking a risk to go do something I love? The risk is very little when you can sort of, create that hourly rate and like, you know what do I have to lose? And then the other thing that I recognize is that I knew I had great education, but I also know how to bet on myself. So taking that chance did not seem too risky at the time.
So Dee, I mean, I know you're working on not only Robinson Hill, but other things. I hear there may be some bourbon in your life. Tell me a little bit about what you're up to there.
Well, what's wonderful about this company is that we've learned how to evolve and scale, but sometimes we have to learn to pivot as well. So where we go from having food and beverage operations, with my first one being Ben and Jerry's, and then understanding was the importance of being very strong operationally. And then I also talk about partnerships, how challenging they can be, but make sure that you got the right partners where values align. And so that's how we scaled over a course of time and some of those great brands that you mentioned, and then how I became even a partner with Hudson News. So I'm going to thank the audience for supporting our business out there, right? But then as 2019 was our best year ever for many people in the restaurant business, and all of a sudden it was disrupted by the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that, because what a ride. I remember reading an article about the concessions industry, specifically related to airports, actually, and how it was just growing like gangbusters as people were building these new experiences in airports in 2019. And then boom, 2020 hits. Tell me about the pandemic ride and how you guys handled it.
Well, first of all, it was a ride, and a rough one at that. And we went from having a banner year to literally having sales drop to zero.
Wow.
And we were just seeing declines, then it was 85% of sales. It was just awful. And then the worst part is your people. We had no business for them. And I actually wrote an article about the true frontliners, because people in the restaurant business, people in airports, we support so many people. But during that time, we also learned about who we were and the culture we had, because it wasn't the folks' fault. Our people didn't ask for this. So I actually had to figure out how to support my team throughout the pandemic. And we did that throughout. And it was challenging, but we knew that we had to. But we also had this benefit. By doing that, we did have more of our people return. Our return rates were a lot higher than other people's. But the fact is, it was challenging. And then at the same time, you can either sit there and complain and worry, or you can figure out how you can use that time efficiently. So I wrote books, but at the same time, I also started thinking about other businesses that we could explore. And so I had always been thinking about bourbon, because I actually like to drink that brown liquor. And it was just challenging, but I also set out to do one thing: create bourbon worthy of the name. To have something that we knew was going to be well received by the market. But we also talk about purposeful work. And I'm going to tell you something. During the pandemic, I felt helpless, honestly.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, how can I help? And then we were all sitting there trying to figure it out, but we were struck with fear. And then my first effort was actually, I went out and started doing food drives, because I was touched by the long lines I would see of people who've never could imagine ever having to be in a line to get food to the family. And there was I think it was CNN story, and they were interviewing a woman, and there were 4 generations in the car. She was there, her father, her child, and the child's kid. 4 generations, and they were trying to get food. So I'm like, what can we do? And oftentimes we think we got to do big things. We can do just one thing, small things that help others. And so that's sort of one thing that led to some of the work I did during the pandemic. But it also, as I was thinking about bourbon, I came up with this idea of something that would also could be mission driven. And so the bourbon called Good Trouble.
Good Trouble.
It's something I'm incredibly proud of. And many people think about John Lewis when they hear the name. But real quickly, that story is really my story growing up with a mom who's all through my books, and who my company is also named after. I had an older sister who was hell on wheels. And so when you get that first child, you learn a lot. 10 years later, and she used to say to us, the only kind of trouble we could get in was good trouble, because my sister got in all the other kind. So, but it was how I started thinking about how do we make impact in this world. I'm using bourbon as a catalyst, a tool to start brave conversations, spirited conversations about some of the social problems we have in the world.
Wow, that's great. I'd love to try it sometime. I think I was a heavy consumer of bourbon during the pandemic. So
there were two major industries that did incredibly well during the pandemic. And the liquor business was one, and maybe again, why many of us sort of said, here's a nice pivot for my food and beverage business. And we went to Kentucky to make this bourbon and work with an 8th generation master distiller. But to your point, a lot of people were drinking it. It's a booming industry. And then I also am a trustee for the PGA of America's Foundation. And the golf industry as well has also blossomed during this time. So, but I think that's what you do in any situation. Instead of thinking about what's the worst or what could happen and go wrong, think about what the opportunities are and what they present.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
I love it. I love the way that your mind works and how you pursued other avenues for innovation and opportunity. And now we're seeing the world awake again. And certainly, I mean, going back to your core business at Robinson Hill, I mean, wow, talk about a roller coaster. Go from success to then everything quiets down to suddenly now everyone's traveling everywhere. Everyone's out and about. Tell me about what the trends are right now in the space.
Great question. First of all, our challenge today is how do we maintain or create sustainable growth, but do that in the face of a very disruptive labor market. Our biggest challenge is how do we keep our stores open, because we don't have enough people. Our O'Hare business is challenged to this day. We don't have all of our operations open, and yet there's tons of people coming into the airports. Also the consumer or the passenger has changed a bit. It is not as business versus sort of your tourist, your family traveler. So spending is also very different, but it's also now figuring out how do we create businesses offerings that actually now cater to that demographic. We also lost the Asian market in particular that drove a lot of sales. That will return, but the challenges of how do we engage employees now? How do we get them? And actually, I've had to be more creative and really do untraditional things to try to find team members. You just can't put an ad in the paper or put something out, post it and expect that they're going to come. So we're trying all sorts of things, from referral programs, contests, you name it. We're trying our best to find people. But something you and I talked about before about culture, though, it's important that they know who they're coming to work for. I don't think we always tell people, here's what you're going to get. You give them very traditional things. Let them know that they're joining a family or whatever that culture of your company might be. I think that's how you attract team members. And then also meet them where they need to be met. For instance, we now provide transportation. I mean, we'll pay for your, in our case here, we got the L, but whatever transportation service, whether bus or train, we will buy those tickets. We're actually trying something kind of innovative. I'm a little concerned that we're going to pay you every day. There's a method that we're actually testing at O'Hare, where people getting cash regularly.
I'm not going to lie. Dee, you and I know, like, we both grew up doing jobs. And one of the jobs that I had in college was I was a mover. And the thing I loved about this job, now, again, remember I was a freshman in college, was that every Friday we got paid and we would get an envelope of cash. And I, there was something about that. Now, obviously, lots of people don't use cash anymore, but there was something about that immediacy. So I think the idea of getting paid every day, I can see how that psychologically could be a huge advantage.
Well, it's true. And I'm glad we're doing it in test mode, because also something I did very early in my career in concessions. I actually changed how we pay people, because guess what? You mentioned being paid on Friday. My peak period is the weekend. What we were learning is you get paid, and guess what? You're going to go out and have a really good time. And I have the greatest number of
Yeah.
call-outs.
Yeah, that money never lasted longer than like Monday morning.
Well, but to your point, we suddenly
Yeah.
recognize two things. It's hurting our business to pay
Yeah.
on Friday. So we moved it to Monday. But by doing that, you know what else happens to your point? I actually now think people are smarter about what they spend their money on because it's
Yeah.
the way. So we did that many, many years ago. And I encourage other people to think about it, particularly if you have businesses that are driven by having team members in place on the weekend. But
Yeah.
this new concept of cash daily, again, it's a test, but it is something because we do have to now meet them where they are. This is the laborers' time. They are the king and queens out there, and they dictate how we act. But let's listen to them, and I
Yeah.
think if we do, we're going to find that we have a stronger employee pool.
I love that idea, actually. I'm excited to hear how that goes and develops. But Dee, I mean, when you think going forward, I mean, we got out of the pandemic and we seem to have jumped, from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak, into a world with high inflation, some of these other lovely challenges that we're facing. I mean, how are you thinking about navigating, let's say, the next 6 to 18 months? What are the big issues on the horizon? Where are you going?
So I think first of all, what we're trying to do is figure out how we're a new company, the new normal and what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Also recognize how labor rates are increasing. So, I mean, they're telling us what we got to pay them. And so it's also forcing us to be stronger operators and really focus on operational efficiencies. How do we manage supply chain? A lot of people didn't really think about it until the pandemic, right? But it's really trying to look at everything also in looking at new businesses, following the trends, where are things going, and trying to be ahead of it as best you can. And so right now, again, that's why we moved into the bourbon business, where we're looking at other opportunities that will strengthen our business. When we actually opened one of the first Lebanese Mediterranean concepts, we were looking at the trend that people wanted healthier fare. I had this one concept that bombed, and it just did. It was healthy fries and all of that. But I was really just persistent in finding the right thing, and then Mediterranean showed up. But it's the same kind of thing. What else are people looking for? And so we don't have all the answers yet, Van, but I know one thing is that what we're pursuing in this bourbon space is exciting. A lot of my work too is now focused on, women, empowering women. I just got appointed to the XM, the Export Import Bank. And thrilled to be on the Council for Advancing Women in Business. And there's a particular need to help women, and women empowering women is just part of my passion, mission, and the work that I do, but also helping folks in that space. So we're also doing a lot of work in investing. I'm a venture capitalist. And so we invest in women in terms of technology. I'm involved with an organization that focuses on scaling women in the life science technology spaces as well. Looking at technology as well, back to my business, what technologies do we need to introduce to the business to help us, continue to grow?
I love it. And I mean, I can only see big opportunities. There may be trouble ahead in various areas in the big economy, but hopefully it's good trouble. Good trouble.
Good trouble. That's exactly right. That's what we like. I used to think about being on a golf course. People like golf course. I'm like, good trouble being right. And the ball hits right there before it goes in the bunker. That's good trouble, right?
Good trouble. Good trouble. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you about everything that you're working on. If someone wanted to learn more about Robinson Hill and some of the other areas that you're focused on these days, where's the best place to find you?
Well, where I'd love to send everyone right now is I wrote a book called Courage by Design. And if they go to that website, Courage by Design, and they can also navigate to my Robinson Hill USA site there too. But that book truly is something I want many people to think about reading, because what I learned during the pandemic and fear keeps us from living our dreams. And I believe we should be anywhere our dreams take us. And so when we have the courage to hear, the courage to act and the courage to do the right thing, many opportunities going to open up. So I really just want to inspire the world to go out there and live a life of joy, fulfillment, and purpose. The book the subtitle is 10 Commandments plus one. One is how we win at DE&I. We really have to find a way. And I wrote an article for Forbes about leadership, accountability, and metrics. We need to just get out there and figure this problem out. And that's also what we're trying to do with the bourbon. But it's been a joy talking with you, Ben. And
yeah,
we could do this all day.
I've loved talking with you, and I definitely recommend Courage by Design. And also, congratulations on the growth and success of the business, and really the great advice that you've provided our audience today on how you navigated the pandemic and how you worked through it, how you've developed new ideas coming out of it, and how those are now being put into action. Dee, it's been amazing having you on Uncaged, and we look forward to having you back.
Well, thank you so very much. It's been my pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.